The doctor examined me and saw I had something special, and he fell in love. It all started in a quiet clinic, where I expected nothing more than a routine checkup. I walked into that room thinking it would be just another day, another appointment. But the moment his eyes met mine, something shifted. He wasn't just any doctor. His presence carried warmth, depth, and a calmness that disarmed me. As he examined me, he noticed something beyond the physical, something I didn't even realize about myself. In that moment, he saw more than a patient. He saw a person with something rare, something special. And that was the beginning of a connection neither of us expected. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss these powerful and emotional stories that might just reflect a piece of your own journey. What happens when a doctor crosses the line between duty and desire, and love appears in the most unexpected place? Stay with me until the end. This story will leave you questioning fate itself. I never imagined that one simple appointment could change the course of my life. I remember sitting in the waiting room of that small clinic, scrolling nervously through my phone while pretending not to notice the other patients. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee from the vending machine in the corner. I wasn't sick, not really. It was just a checkup, something routine. But my chest was heavy that day, not because of illness, but because I was carrying things inside me I couldn't put into words. Questions about myself, about who I was, about feelings I had tried to ignore for years. When the nurse finally called my name, I stood up too quickly, nearly stumbling as I followed her down the narrow hallway. She stopped at a door and gestured me inside. I expected the usual sterile atmosphere. A desk, a bed covered with white paper, the faint hum of medical equipment. What I didn't expect was him. Dr. Elias Morgan looked up from his notes as I entered. He wasn't much older than me, maybe in his mid-30s, but there was something about him that commanded attention instantly. His dark hair was neatly pushed back, his jawline sharp but softened by the kind of kind eyes that seemed to notice everything. He stood to greet me, extending his hand. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm, smooth, and grounding in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. "You must be here for your checkup." I nodded, shaking his hand. My throat felt dry, and I had to force myself to sit down as he gestured toward the exam chair. He asked the usual questions, how I was feeling, my habits, my sleep, and I gave the usual half-hearted answers. But something about the way he listened made me feel exposed, as if my words were more than just routine data. His eyes didn't just observe, they studied, gently, carefully, as though he was searching for something beyond the surface. "Take a deep breath for me," he said at one point, pressing the stethoscope against my chest. The cold metal startled me, but what startled me more was how close he was, the scent of his cologne mingling with the antiseptic air. I inhaled, trying to focus on breathing and not on how my heart raced far faster than it should have. "Your heartbeat," he murmured almost to himself, "is strong. Steady." He pulled back, meeting my eyes for a moment too long. "There's something different here." I frowned, unsure of what he meant. "Different?" He smiled faintly, shaking his head as if he'd spoken too much. Not in a bad way. Just special. The word hung in the air between us. Special. No doctor had ever said that to me. Most appointments ended with numbers, charts, instructions. But here was Elias, looking at me as though I wasn't just a body to measure, but a person worth noticing. My chest tightened again, though not from nerves this time. It was something else, something warmer. He continued the exam, professional and focused, but the atmosphere had shifted. Every time his hand brushed against my arm or adjusted my position, a spark lit beneath my skin. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was reading too much into simple gestures. Yet I couldn't ignore how his eyes softened whenever they returned to mine, or how his voice grew lower, as if meant only for me. At one point, as he wrote notes on my chart, he asked, "Do you ever feel like people overlook you?" The question caught me off guard. "Why do you ask?" He looked up slowly. "Because I don't. I see something here." His pen tapped lightly against the paper, but his gaze never left me. "It's rare." I felt heat rising to my face. No one had ever spoken to me like that. Not friends, not family, not anyone. It was as though he wasn't just examining my body but had somehow glimpsed into a part of me I usually kept hidden. Before I could respond, the nurse knocked on the door, reminding him that his next patient was waiting. Elias nodded, but his eyes lingered on me. "Your results are excellent," he said, handing me the paper with clinical efficiency, though his tone carried something gentler. "You're in good health. But if you don't mind, I'd like to see you again. Just for a follow-up." I blinked, confused. A follow-up? Is something wrong? He shook his head. "Not wrong. Just important." I couldn't help but smile, though uncertainty swirled in my stomach. Something about the way he said it left me wondering if this was really about medicine anymore. As I left the clinic, the cool air hit my face, but my body was still warm, my thoughts tangled. Doctors didn't usually talk like that. They didn't say words like special. They didn't look at you as though they were trying to memorize your face. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail of our encounter. His voice, his hands, his eyes. I told myself it was nothing, just a kind man doing his job. But deep down I knew something had shifted. Something had begun. And as I finally drifted into restless sleep, one thought refused to leave my mind. What would happen at the follow-up appointment? A week passed, but it felt like a month. Every day I thought about that appointment, about the way Dr. Elias had looked at me and said I was special. No one else had ever used that word to describe me, and it kept echoing in my head, as if it carried a meaning I hadn't yet uncovered. I told myself I was foolish, that I was just projecting feelings onto a man who was only doing his job. But still, when the day of the follow-up arrived, I couldn't deny the mixture of nervousness and anticipation that stirred in my chest. The clinic looked the same as before, sterile and calm, but this time it felt different walking through its doors. I noticed details I had ignored before: the soft hum of the fluorescent lights, the faint squeak of shoes against polished floors, the low murmur of the receptionist greeting patients. My hands trembled as I signed in, and I couldn't stop wondering if Elias would even remember me, or worse, if he had forgotten everything he had said. When the nurse led me into his office, I saw him again. Elias was seated behind his desk, reviewing papers, but as soon as I entered, his eyes lifted, and there it was. That same warmth, that same focus, like I was the only person in the room. "Good to see you again," he said. His voice was steady, but softer than I expected. "I've been waiting for this follow-up." My pulse quickened. I didn't think you usually scheduled them this quickly." He smiled faintly, rising from his chair. "Sometimes I make exceptions." His words unsettled me, though not in a bad way. They hung in the air, charged with something unspoken. He motioned for me to sit down as he prepared his tools, the stethoscope gleaming under the overhead light. The exam began like last time, but I was hyper-aware of every detail: the cool pressure of the stethoscope on my chest, the way his sleeve brushed my arm, the closeness of his face when he leaned in to listen. I tried to stay calm, but my heart betrayed me, beating faster with each passing second. "Your heart beats stronger this time," he noted, his tone low. "Though a little fast." I swallowed hard. Maybe it's the coffee I had this morning. Elias raised his eyes, and I could tell he didn't believe me. His gaze lingered, curious, almost daring me to admit the truth. I looked away, afraid of what he might see if I didn't. As he continued, he asked me questions that weren't medical at all. "What do you do in your free time? Do you live alone? Do you have family nearby?" They weren't the typical inquiries of a doctor. They were personal, intimate, the kind of questions that revealed more than I was used to sharing. I answered carefully, but he listened intently, nodding as if every word mattered. And then, just when I thought the conversation was winding down, he leaned back and said something that made my stomach twist. "You know," Elias began, "there's something about you I can't quite explain. Most patients come and go, and I forget them by the end of the day. But you..." I remembered. Every detail. I froze. His honesty was disarming. "Why are you telling me this?" He tilted his head slightly as if searching for the right words. Because I don't want you to think it's just routine for me. It's not. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with everything we weren't saying. I wanted to ask what he meant, to push him to define the unspoken tension between us. But before I could, a loud knock interrupted us. The nurse opened the door, apologizing for the intrusion. "Doctor, there's an urgent call you need to take." Elias hesitated, his eyes still on me. Then, with a reluctant sigh, he excused himself and stepped into the hall, closing the door behind him. The room felt colder without him. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "It's not routine for me." Those words replayed in my head until the door opened again. When Elias returned, his expression had changed. Something weighed on him, though he tried to hide it. He sat back down across from me, but his eyes were more intense now, almost conflicted. "I'm sorry about that," he said quietly. "But before we continue, I need to be honest." My heart pounded. Honest about what? He leaned forward, his voice low. "I don't know what this is, or why it's happening. But I feel drawn to you in a way I shouldn't. You're my patient, and I'm your doctor. There are lines I'm supposed to respect." And yet, his words trailed off, but his eyes finished the sentence for him. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. And yet I can't ignore it anymore," he admitted. "When I said you were special, I wasn't talking about your health. I was talking about you." The world tilted around me. I had dreamed of hearing those words, but now that they were real, I didn't know how to breathe. My throat felt tight, my palms sweaty, my mind racing with questions I couldn't form. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. All I managed was, "Elias, what are you saying?" He held my gaze, unwavering. "I'm saying that I don't want this to end when you walk out that door. I'm saying that I want to know you, not just as a patient, but as a person." My chest ached, torn between excitement and fear. This wasn't just about attraction, it was dangerous, forbidden even. But the way he looked at me left no room for doubt. He meant every word. I opened my mouth to respond, to tell him what I was feeling, when suddenly the nurse knocked again, reminding him his next patient was waiting. Elias cursed under his breath, his frustration raw. "Think about what I said," he told me, his voice urgent. "I'll find a way for us to talk away from here." I nodded, but my heart was in chaos. As I left his office, the weight of his confession pressed against me like a storm waiting to break. For the first time, I knew this wasn't just in my imagination. He felt it too. But what would it mean for both of us if we dared to cross that line? I walked out of the clinic with my head spinning. The street outside buzzed with the usual chaos. Horns honking, people rushing to catch buses, children laughing as they ran across the sidewalk, but I felt disconnected from it all. My world had shifted inside that small examination room. Elias hadn't just crossed a line, he had erased it completely with his words. "You're special. I want to know you." 4 days afterward, I replayed every second in my mind. His voice, low and deliberate. His eyes, unwavering. I wanted to believe it, to let myself fall into the possibility of what he was offering. And yet, fear gripped me. He was my doctor. What would people think? What if I misunderstood? What if, outside that room, everything he said lost its meaning? I didn't have to wonder long. Elias found a way. 3 days later, I received a message from an unknown number. "Meet me at the cafe on Willow Street, 7 p.m. Don't worry, it's quiet. Just us." The message wasn't signed, but I didn't need a name. I knew who it was. I arrived at the cafe early, my hands trembling as I wrapped them around a mug of coffee I barely touched. The place was dimly lit, tucked away on a quiet corner of the city. When Elias walked in, wearing a simple navy sweater instead of his white coat, he looked different, more approachable, less like the man who carried the weight of lives in his hands. He spotted me instantly, his lips curving into a smile that reached his eyes. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Neither was I admitted, my voice softer than I intended. For a moment, silence stretched between us, filled only by the clink of dishes in the background. Then he leaned forward, his hands clasped together on the table. I meant everything I said. You're not just a patient to me. I've been thinking about you since the first day you walked in. I swallowed, trying to steady my breathing. Elias, this isn't normal. Doctors don't say those things. Patients don't feel this way. His gaze didn't waver. Maybe it's not normal. But it's real. The way he said it left no room for doubt. My chest tightened, torn between caution and the desire I could no longer ignore. So what happens now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I don't know. But I do know I don't want to pretend anymore. I wanted to respond, to tell him how much I wanted this too, but before I could, the cafe door opened and a gust of cold air swept in along with a group of strangers. Their laughter filled the small space, and instinctively, Elias lowered his voice, leaning closer to me. People wouldn't understand, he said. They'd see this as wrong, unprofessional, maybe even dangerous. His honesty both scared and comforted me. At least he wasn't pretending this would be easy. Then why risk it? I asked. He smiled faintly, his eyes searching mine. Because you're worth the risk. My heart lurched. Those words shattered my defenses. For the first time, I let myself smile back, though it was shaky, uncertain. You don't even know me that well. Then let me, he said simply. The evening passed in a blur of conversation. He asked about my childhood, my dreams, my fears. I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't with anyone in years. And in return, he shared pieces of himself I hadn't expected. A father who never believed in him, the pressure of being perfect in a profession where mistakes were unforgivable, the loneliness that came with always being the one people relied on. By the time we left the cafe, the city lights glowed against the dark sky, and the air was crisp with the promise of winter. We walked side by side, our shoulders brushing, until we reached the corner where we had to part ways. Neither of us wanted to move. Elias stopped, turning to face me. His breath was visible in the cold air, mingling with mine. I want to kiss you, he admitted, his voice low and raw. But I don't want to scare you. My body tensed, caught between fear and longing. I had imagined this moment, dreamed of it, but now that it was here, I was paralyzed. My lips parted but no sound came out. Elias studied me, his eyes filled with patience. Then, slowly, he stepped closer, his hand hovering near mine. He didn't touch me, not yet, but the warmth radiating from him made my skin prickle. Tell me to stop, he whispered. I couldn't. Every cell in my body screamed for him to close the distance. But my voice betrayed my hesitation. Elias, I don't know if this is right. He nodded, pulling back slightly, though the longing in his eyes never dimmed. Then I'll wait. For as long as it takes. I watched him walk away, his figure disappearing into the night, my heart pounding in my chest. I should have felt relief, but instead I felt an ache, sharp and insistent. I wanted him. I wanted the kiss I had denied myself. When I finally returned home, I collapsed onto my bed, my mind a storm of emotions. Doubt gnawed at me. Was I leading him on? Was I brave enough to face what this could mean? But underneath it all, one truth remained. Elias had seen me, really seen me, in a way no one else ever had. And as much as I tried to resist, I knew this was only the beginning. The following week was torture. I went through the motions of daily life, but every thought drifted back to Elias. The way his eyes had softened when he said he would wait, the unspoken desire between us that lingered like an unfinished sentence. At night, I replayed that moment on the street corner, my lips tingling with the kiss that never happened. It wasn't just attraction anymore. It was something deeper, something pulling me toward him no matter how much I tried to resist. But the world has a way of testing fragile beginnings. It happened one afternoon when I stopped by the clinic to pick up a form I had forgotten to request earlier. I wasn't supposed to see Elias. I told myself it would be a quick errand. But as I stood in line at the reception desk, I heard a voice just a few feet away, loud enough to make me freeze. Dr. Morgan, we've been getting questions. the head nurse said, her tone sharp, suspicious. About you spending too much time with one of your patients. My heart lurched. She didn't say my name, but I knew. Elias's response was quiet, but I could hear the tension in his voice. I don't know what you mean, he replied, measured and professional. The nurse wasn't convinced. People notice things, Elias. The way you look at him. The way you rearranged your schedule for a follow-up that wasn't necessary. You're putting yourself at risk. Don't forget your license is on the line. Silence followed. I couldn't breathe. I slipped out of the building before Elias could see me, my chest tight with panic. They knew. Or at least, they suspected. And if the rumor spread, it wouldn't just be his career. It would be both of us facing the weight of judgment. That night, Elias called me. His voice was steady, but I could sense the strain beneath it. We need to talk. Meet me at the park, near the fountain at 9. When I arrived, the park was quiet, the fountain glowing under dim streetlights. Elias was already there, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes, but when he saw me, something softened. They know, I whispered, not even waiting for him to speak. He nodded grimly. Or they suspect. Either way, it's dangerous. Then maybe we should stop, I blurted out, though the words tasted like ash in my mouth. Elias's eyes widened, hurt flashing across his face. Is that what you want? I shook my head fiercely. No. God, no. But what if they're right? What if this ruins you? He stepped closer, his voice low and intense. You think I care about titles or licenses more than I care about you? I've spent my whole life being careful, doing everything by the book, and where has it left me? Alone. Empty. Then you walked in, and for the first time, I felt alive again. Do you think I'm going to let fear take that from me? My throat tightened. I wanted to believe him, to let myself fall into the certainty in his voice. But another voice echoed in my head, the nurse's warning, the threat hanging over us. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything, I whispered. Elias reached out, his hand brushing against mine, tentative at first, then firmer when I didn't pull away. You're not the reason. You're the reason I finally have something worth fighting for. The dam inside me broke. I stepped into him, closing the distance, and for the first time, our lips met. The kiss was urgent, desperate, years of restraint crashing down all at once. His hands framed my face, mine clutched his coat, and the world around us disappeared. It was just us, in the glow of the fountain, finally giving in to what we had both denied. When we pulled back, breathless, Elias rested his forehead against mine. Now you know, I'm not going anywhere. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. But it didn't last. The next morning, I received a message from an unknown number, stay away from Dr. Morgan, or everyone will know what's happening between you. My blood ran cold. Someone had seen us. Someone was watching. I showed the message to Elias that evening. He read it with a clenched jaw, his knuckles white as he gripped the phone. They're trying to scare you. Don't let them. But what if they're not just threats? I asked, my voice shaking. What if they go public? What if they destroy you? He set the phone down, taking my hands firmly in his. Let them. I'm done living for everyone else's approval. I choose you. Tears burned my eyes. No one had ever chosen me like that before, fully, fiercely, without hesitation. And yet, the weight of what it could cost him pressed on me like a shadow. That night, lying awake in my bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the message. Whoever had sent it was out there, waiting for us to make one wrong move. I knew one thing for certain, the storm wasn't over. In fact, it was only beginning. The threats didn't stop. 4 days, messages arrived from unknown numbers, each one sharper, colder, more merciless than the last. And now, you're destroying him. We'll expose you both. I tried to stay calm, but the fear was a constant ache in my chest. Every time I left the apartment, I looked over my shoulder. Every time I met Elias, I wondered if eyes were watching from the shadows. And yet, I couldn't stay away. Being with him was both my greatest comfort and my greatest risk. One evening, Elias called me and said, "Meet me at the hospital gala tomorrow. I want you there." My heart lurched. "Are you sure? That's public. Everyone will see." "I don't care anymore," he replied firmly. "I'm done hiding. If they want to talk, let them. If they want to judge, let them. I want you by my side." I wanted to believe it would be that simple, but I knew the world wasn't kind to men who stepped outside the lines. Still, the determination in his voice left me with no choice. "I'll be there," I whispered. The gala was held in the city's grandest ballroom, chandeliers glittering overhead, waiters gliding between tables with trays of champagne. Men in suits and women in gowns filled the space, their laughter echoing against marble walls. I felt painfully out of place, adjusting the borrowed blazer I wore as I scanned the room for Elias. Then I saw him. He stood near the stage, dressed in a black suit that fit him like it was made for him. His hair was perfectly styled, but his eyes softened the moment they found mine. He crossed the room without hesitation, ignoring the stares that followed him. "You came," he said, relief flooding his features as he took my hand. "I told you I would." The warmth of his hand in mine steadied me, but I could feel the eyes burning into us, whispers already spreading. For the first time, Elias didn't flinch. He led me onto the dance floor as the orchestra began to play. It felt surreal, moving with him in a room full of people who would rather see us apart. His hand pressed against my back, his breath close to my ear. "They're watching," I murmured. "Let them," he replied. "All they'll see is the truth." But the truth has a way of demanding its price. Halfway through the evening, the head of the hospital board took the stage, his voice booming through the microphone. "Tonight, we celebrate the dedication of our finest doctors. But unfortunately, we must also address rumors that threaten the reputation of this institution." My stomach dropped. Elias stiffened beside me, his jaw tightening. The man continued, his words cutting like blades. "It has come to our attention that Dr. Elias Morgan has been engaging in behavior unbecoming of his profession, involving a personal relationship with a patient. Such conduct is unacceptable and will not be tolerated." The room erupted into murmurs, heads turning, eyes narrowing. Heat rushed to my face as shame wrapped around me like chains. I wanted to run, to disappear. But Elias's grip on my hand tightened, grounding me. He stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with fire. "Enough." The crowd fell silent. Elias's gaze swept across the room, then settled on the board members. "You speak of professionalism, but you know nothing of the reality we face every day. I have given my life to this hospital. I have sacrificed sleep, relationships, even my own health to serve others. And yet, the moment I find someone who makes me feel alive, you dare call it unacceptable?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Elias turned, his eyes locking on mine. "Yes, it's true. I love him." The world seemed to stop. The whispers, the stares, the judgment, all blurred into background noise. All I could hear was my own heartbeat and the echo of his words. "I love him." Tears burned my eyes. I had been afraid, so afraid of what this would cost him, of what the world would say. But Elias wasn't afraid anymore. He stood in front of hundreds of people, his career on the line, and chose me. The board member sputtered, his face red. "Dr. Morgan, you've just signed your resignation." Elias lifted his chin. "Then so be it. I'd rather lose a title than lose myself." The room erupted again, but this time I didn't hear it. I only saw him, standing there with his hands still holding mine, his eyes filled with a mix of defiance and love. I pulled him close, whispering, "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he said softly. "Because if I didn't, I would have lost you. And losing you would have been worse than losing everything else." My tears spilled freely then, and before I could stop myself, I kissed him. Right there, in front of everyone, with all their judgment hanging over us like a storm. The kiss wasn't just desire, it was defiance, it was truth, it was love unchained. When we pulled apart, the crowd was divided, Some faces twisted in disapproval, others softened with awe. But none of it mattered. Elias pressed his forehead to mine, whispering, "No more hiding. Not ever again." And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. Love wasn't about safety. It wasn't about fitting into the expectations of others. It was about courage. The courage to be seen, to be vulnerable, to stand against the storm and say, "This is who we are. This is who I love." That night, Elias lost his career, but neither of us lost what mattered most. We walked out of that ballroom hand in hand, stepping into the cold night air, the weight of the world still against us, but also behind us, because we finally had each other. And as we disappeared into the city streets, I knew the truth. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid.